Okay, so get this. Today, we're diving deep into software development, but not in the way you might think.
Oh,
Yeah, we're not talking code or algorithms, at least not directly.
interesting. What are we looking at then?
We're going behind the scenes of this company, ISD. We're dissecting their website.
Ah, okay, so it's like a digital detective mission.
Exactly. We're trying to see how they present themselves to the world, what story they're telling.
Makes sense. It's like their carefully crafted image, right? But the image and the reality of working with them sometimes,
Can be two very different things.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's where we come in.
I see where you're going with this.
We're going to sift through the marketing speak, analyze those subtle clues, see what we can learn about their business model, their strengths, and maybe even, some potential red flags.
Love it. Put on those detective hats, everyone.
All right, so first thing that jumps out at me. Right at the top of the page, they've got phone numbers for both Moldova and the Netherlands.
Hmm. That's interesting. Not your typical Silicon Valley setup.
Right, so what do you make of that?
Well, it's a pretty common strategy.
Hmm.
Companies tap into talent pools in regions with lower costs of living, but still want that presence in the established tech hubs.
So they're playing both sides.
Yeah, kind of. It's not inherently good or bad, but it raises some questions.
Like what? Give me the insider scoop.
Well, you got to think about communication, time zones.
Yeah.
How easy is it to actually connect with their team?
Right, makes sense.
Do they have solid processes in place to make sure things run smoothly across different locations?
Yeah.
And are they transparent about where your project's actually going to be handled?
Okay, so location is something to definitely keep in mind.
Definitely.
But speaking of communication, check out this quote. Work with us as if we sit in your office.
Oh, I saw that.
Daily check-ins, desk time reports, even site visits. They're really pushing this idea of being a seamless extension of your team, even across continents.
It's a bold claim.
It is.
It's a bit of a tightrope walk, honestly. In today's world of remote work, communication and expectations have to be crystal clear.
Yeah, you can't just say you're like an in-house team. You got to prove it.
Actions speak louder than words, right?
So are they all talk? Or could they actually pull this off?
It's hard to say for sure at this point,
Yeah.
but the fact they're emphasizing it up front, that's a good sign. At least they understand it's important, trying to address those concerns right away.
Okay, fair enough. Let's dive into what they actually offer. They've got three main service models: team extension, dedicated teams, and end-to-end solutions.
Okay, covering all the bases, I see.
Right. So what are the key differences here, and who would each model appeal to?
Well, they each offer a different level of control versus involvement, depending on what the client needs and prefers.
Gotcha.
So team extension, think of it like adding a few extra players to your existing team, but they happen to be based in Moldova or the Netherlands.
Okay, so like hiring freelancers, but with more structure.
Exactly. Now, dedicated teams, that's different. It's more like outsourcing a whole chunk of
I'll
development.
see.
ISD would put together a team just for your project, handle the day-to-day management. You provide overall direction.
And that works well for...
Larger, more complex projects where
Yeah.
you don't want to be micromanaging every single detail.
Makes sense. And then there's the holy grail, end-to-end solutions. Sounds almost too good to be true.
It's the dream.
They take your idea and poof, you have a finished product.
Yeah, but there are some caveats.
Oh, of course.
End-to-end usually means a super detailed scope of work up front, and that can limit flexibility down the line.
So you really got to know what you want from the start.
Right. And even though it sounds hands-off, you still got to be involved in those key decisions.
So not exactly set it and forget it.
Not quite.
Hmm.
More like a guided journey. You're the navigator. ISD is the captain steering the ship.
I like that analogy.
But hey, even with a captain, you still want to know where you're going, right?
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the part of the website that always catches my eye, client testimonials.
Ah, yes, the chorus of praise.
They're singing ISD's virtues: quality, communication, seamless integration. Are they really that good? Or is this just marketing magic?
Well, remember, testimonials are always carefully selected. It's showcasing what the company wants to be known for.
Right.
And for ISD, they really seem to be hammering home this message of seamless extension of your team, which ties back to that whole we're in your office thing.
Yeah, it's a consistent theme for sure.
It is. But it's interesting to see what specific aspects these clients are praising.
Yeah, and we should also consider who these people are, right? CEOs, CTOs, folks from big name companies.
Oh, for sure. It definitely adds credibility.
Yeah.
But it's just one piece of the puzzle. You got to look at the whole picture, not just the shiny, happy parts.
Okay, good point. And speaking of the whole picture, there's something else that caught my eye. They're boasting these impressive numbers, 90 plus successful projects, 10 plus years of experience.
What's good on paper?
Right. But then there's this little tidbit, 10 plus yearly customer visits. 10 plus. That seems oddly low, especially for a company that's all about close collaboration and on-site presence.
Yeah, that is a head scratcher. If they're really walking the walk on that whole we're in your office thing, you'd expect more visits.
Right. It makes you wonder, are they downplaying this number for a reason?
Maybe.
Maybe most of their clients are fully remote by choice, and those visits are concentrated on a smaller subset, or maybe it's a metric they're not particularly proud of. Hard to say for sure.
Yeah, without more context, who knows?
But it highlights something important, right? You got to look beyond the surface, dig a little deeper. Sometimes the things that aren't said can be just as revealing.
I agree with that.
Okay, so we've got location strategy, communication style, service models, and some eyebrow-raising numbers. Now let's shift gears and check out their skills and technologies section. They list a pretty broad range, but anything stand out to you?
Well, they seem to have a strong foundation in languages like Java, .NET, JavaScript. Those are common in enterprise software development. But what's really interesting is this emphasis on programming hardware, embedded, PLC, IoT. That suggests they might be targeting a pretty specific niche.
Hold on, back up a second. PLC, IoT, break it down for those of us who aren't fluent in tech jargon.
Here, PLC stands for Programmable Logic Controller.
Okay.
Basically, it's like a specialized computer used to control machinery and industrial processes.
Got it.
And IoT, that's the Internet of Things,
Ah, the Internet of Things.
where everyday devices are connected to the Internet. They can all communicate with each other.
Right, right. So they're not just building websites and apps. They're getting into industrial automation, connected devices, all that.
Exactly. That focus on PLC and IoT, that could be their secret weapon. It sets them apart from those more generic software companies. It positions them as the experts in this really rapidly growing field.
So they're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're carving out a niche.
That's what it seems like. And in a competitive market like software development, having a clear specialization can be a huge advantage.
Makes sense. It lets you really target those clients who are specifically looking for your expertise. Okay, one last thing before we move on.
Sure.
In their job postings, they mentioned aiming for 30% growth per year. That's ambitious, to say the least.
It's bold.
What kind of pressure does that put on a company, especially in a field as fast-paced as software development?
Well, it's definitely a bold goal. It raises some interesting questions. To achieve that, they need to constantly secure new projects, onboard new clients, potentially expand their team really quickly.
Which could lead to some growing pains, right?
It could. It's a balancing act.
How do you maintain quality in client relationships when you're growing that fast?
On the one hand, that ambition that can signal a company that's hungry for success, always pushing the boundaries. But on the other hand, it could be a red flag, you know?
Yeah.
Potential instability, especially if they prioritize growth above all else.
So for someone considering ISD, this growth goal, it's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's something to think about. You know, what are your priorities? What's your risk tolerance?
Right.
Is stability important to you? Are you comfortable with a company that's constantly expanding? Or would you prefer a more established partner?
All good questions to consider.
They are. And don't be afraid to ask them directly about how they plan to manage that growth. You know, maintain that quality, those relationships. Transparency is key.
Couldn't agree more. If they're confident, they should be able to talk about it openly.
Exactly.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Location strategy, communication style, service models, and even some eyebrow-raising numbers. But I'm sure there's more to uncover as we continue our deep dive.
Oh, absolutely. This is just the beginning. Remember how we were talking about ISD's focus on programming hardware?
Yeah.
And maybe targeting companies with both software and hardware needs?
Yeah.
Well, their connection to Intergroup adds another layer to that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember seeing something about that on their website. Something about being founded as part of Intergroup back in 2008.
Right.
But I'll admit, I kind of skimmed over that part. What's the big deal? Fill me in.
Well, Intergroup specializes in intralogistics.
Intralogistics. Okay, we're going to have to explain that one. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. Intralogistics is basically the optimization of internal logistics.
Okay.
Material handling within a company. So think warehouse automation, conveyor systems, robots moving goods around.
Ah, got it. So ISD was initially focused on providing software support for those kinds of projects.
Exactly.
That makes sense given their emphasis on PLC and hardware programming.
Right. They were born out of a need for those specialized software solutions
Okay.
in the industrial automation space. And that experience is likely a major selling point for them, even as they've expanded. Serving clients outside the group
Yeah.
gives them credibility and a proven track record in a niche market.
It's like having a secret weapon, right?
Right.
They can walk into a meeting and be like, hey, we've been building software for complex industrial systems for over a decade.
Exactly.
We know this stuff inside and out.
Right. And that kind of experience can be really valuable for those clients. They're looking for a partner who understands their specific challenges.
Yeah.
But it's worth noting that they also mentioned expanding their portfolio, adding new technologies in 2014.
Okay.
So they're not just resting on their laurels. They're actively evolving and adapting to those new trends.
So they're trying to strike that balance between leveraging their specialized experience, showing that they're not afraid to embrace new challenges. It's like, we're the automation experts, but we're also ready to tackle whatever you throw at us.
Exactly. And that adaptability can be a big asset in the software world.
For sure. Now, speaking of adaptability, let's talk about their team. They make a big deal about employees holding graduate degrees, being fluent in English, having certifications from big names like Oracle and Cisco. Is this just standard marketing fluff? Or could this actually be a sign of a high-caliber team?
Well, everyone claims to have the best and brightest.
Right.
But these claims can give you a little peek behind the curtain, hints about their hiring practices, level of expertise. It suggests they're investing in attracting top talent. And it's worth noting that they also highlight their team's involvement in, mentoring programs, educational programs.
Really? So they're not just looking for people with impressive resumes. They're committed to developing their employee skills, too.
It seems that way, which can be a good sign about their culture,
Right.
commitment to quality. If they're investing in their employees, chances are they're investing in the quality of their work, too.
Okay, so we've got a company with deep roots in industrial software, a team that seems pretty skilled on paper, and that desire to grow aggressively. But what about the practical stuff? Like, what's it actually like to work with them?
Right.
Do they have processes in place? Make sure things run smoothly? Their FAQ section might give us some hints.
Yes, the FAQ section, a gold mine of information that's often overlooked. It's where companies try to anticipate those potential client questions and address them up front.
All right, let's see what we can find. First up, how soon can I have a dedicated team of 4 engineers? Their answer, about 1 month. Is that realistic?
It's actually pretty in line with the industry averages for onboarding and assembling a team. But of course, it varies.
Sure.
Depends on the complexity of the project and the specific skills you need.
Right.
If you're looking for a team of highly specialized engineers with, niche expertise, might take a little longer.
Yeah.
But for more common skill sets, a month is a reasonable time frame.
So don't expect a team ready to go the next day.
Right. It's a process.
Okay, next question. What qualifications do ISD employees hold? We kind of touched on this already. Anything new here?
They reiterate the degrees and certifications, but they also add that their developers conduct courses at the Technical University of Moldova.
Interesting.
That suggests they're not just practitioners. They're involved in shaping the next generation of tech talent.
That's a good point. It shows a commitment to giving back, staying at the forefront of their field. Okay, this one's important. Can I interview or speak with the developers before hiring? Their answer, definitely.
Good sign. It shows a willingness to be transparent,
Yeah.
Allow potential clients to assess the team firsthand. They even encourage virtual meetings and office visits.
So they're walking the walk on that open communication thing. I like it. Builds trust. Next up, how can I make sure that confidentiality is respected? NDAs all around. Pretty standard, right?
Absolutely. Confidentiality is paramount in software development. Non-disclosure agreements, those are just a basic expectation. The fact that they explicitly address it in their FAQ shows that they take it seriously.
Okay.
They understand the importance of protecting intellectual property.
And lastly, how does ISD ensure the delivery of professional services? Their answer's a bit long-winded, but what's the gist? What are they doing to make sure they deliver?
They highlight a few key things. Long-term partnerships,
Okay.
internal programs for skill development that focus on strong communication, and they mention a dedicated delivery lead for each project.
Okay, so quality control, client collaboration, commitment to exceeding expectations. But again, these are just words on a website. How do we know if they actually live up to these promises?
Right.
What would you recommend someone do before signing on the dotted line?
You got to go beyond the marketing.
Yeah.
Do your due diligence, checking references, looking at their portfolio and really digging into that track record. Those are crucial steps before making any decisions.
Right. This deep dive is just the first step. It's like a starting point for your own investigation. Speaking of deep dives, we've spent a good chunk of time exploring ISD's side of things. But before we wrap up part 2, I want to shift gears a bit. Talk about what all this means for you, the listener.
Okay.
Why should you care about a random software development company in Moldova?
Good question.
What's the takeaway here?
I think that gets to the heart of why we do these deep dives.
Yeah.
Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about the world of software, understanding how companies like ISD operate can be incredibly valuable. It gives you a glimpse behind the curtain.
For example, paint a picture for me.
Okay, let's say you're thinking about outsourcing some software development for your startup. Knowing the different service models, the importance of communication, the factors to consider when evaluating partners, all that can help you make a more informed decision.
That's a great point. It's like having a cheat sheet for navigating this complex world of software development.
Exactly. And even if you're not directly involved in tech, understanding these trends, these forces shaping this industry, it can give you a broader perspective
Yeah.
on how technology impacts our lives.
Yeah.
From the apps we use to the way we work, software everywhere. It's constantly evolving.
So it's not just about ISD.
Right.
It's about the bigger picture, understanding how technology shapes our world and how we can make informed decisions about how we interact with it.
Absolutely. Every deep dive is a chance to learn something new, challenge our assumptions, connect the dots between all these seemingly disparate pieces of information. It's about becoming more informed citizens.
I like the way you think. Now, before we get too philosophical, I want to circle back to one last thing from ISD's website that stood out to me. Remember that quote from their managing director, Radu Corlăteanu?
Yeah.
He talks about creating a consistent customer experience alongside fostering an empowering environment for each team member.
Yeah.
It's a powerful statement, and it comes right before their open positions section.
Yes. Very strategically placed. It's a message crafted to appeal to both clients and potential employees. Hey, we're not just building software, we're creating a positive work environment too.
Exactly. It's a subtle but effective way to attract talent. It highlights their company culture, values, all that. But it raises a question, I think, as we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive.
What's that?
How much weight should we give to a company's stated values versus their actual actions?
That's a great question. It applies not just to software companies, but any organization, really. It's easy to get swept up in those mission statements and testimonials, but at the end of the day, it's the company's behavior that matters.
Yeah.
How they treat clients, employees, that reveals their true character.
So it's all about looking beyond the surface, doing your research, asking tough questions, seeing if their actions align with their words.
Precisely. Being informed, thinking critically,
Yeah.
recognizing there's always more to the story than meets the eye. Now, I don't know about you, but my brain is starting to feel a bit full.
I hear you. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Maybe it's time to give our listeners a chance to absorb all this before we move on to part 3. What do you say?
Sounds good to me. We'll be back soon to wrap up this deep dive and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We spent the last 2 parts really dissecting ISD's website, uncovering their business model, their team, their aspirations. It's amazing how much you can learn about a company just from their online presence, right?
It really is. It's like we've been on this digital treasure hunt.
Yeah.
Piecing together all the clues, trying to understand what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm impressed with what we found.
Me too. But before we wrap up our investigation, there's one point I want to circle back to. It's been bugging me since we first encountered it, that ambitious 30% growth per year goal.
Yes.
Bold, attention-grabbing. But is it realistic? And more importantly, what does it mean for potential clients?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Rapid growth can be exciting, a sign of a company on the move, but it can also be a double-edged sword.
Okay, break it down for me. What are the potential downsides of growing that fast?
Well, just think about it. To hit 30% growth every year, they need to constantly be securing new projects, bringing on new clients, potentially expanding their team like crazy. And all of that puts a strain on resources, processes, and ultimately their ability to deliver, on those promises of quality and client satisfaction.
So it's like trying to build a skyscraper while you're still laying the foundation.
Exactly. It's a high wire act, and it doesn't always work out. Some companies can handle that rapid growth without compromising quality, but others, they struggle to keep up.
So for someone considering ISD, should this growth goal be a red flag?
It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's definitely something to consider, right?
Yeah.
Think about your own priorities, your risk tolerance. How important is stability to you? Are you okay with a company that's in constant flux, or would you prefer someone a bit more established?
And I bet it also depends on the project you're after. If it's small, short term, maybe the rapid growth isn't as big of a deal. But if you're embarking on something large, complex, something that's going to last for months or even years, well, stability and predictability, those might be way more important.
Absolutely. It's all about finding the right fit. And that's where communication is so important. Don't be afraid to just ask ISD directly how they plan to manage that growth. How are they going to maintain that quality and those client relationships?
Yeah, transparency is key. If they're confident, they should be able to articulate that clearly.
Exactly. And if they dodge the question or give you vague answers, well, that might be a red flag. It's your project, your investment, so don't be afraid to ask the tough questions.
Right. All right, I think we have officially squeezed every last drop of insight from ISD's website. It's pretty amazing what you can learn from a little digital detective work, huh?
It is.
We started with the website and we've uncovered their business model, team, values, aspirations, even some potential areas for caution.
It just goes to show the power of critical thinking
Yeah.
and the importance of looking beyond the surface.
Remember, everyone, every company, every website, they tell a story.
They do.
It's up to us to decipher that story, separate the substance from the spin, and make informed decisions.
And that's what the deep dive is all about, right? We're equipping you, the listeners, with the tools and the knowledge to navigate this complex world of information so you can make smarter decisions.
Exactly.
Whether you're evaluating a software development partner, choosing a new product, or just trying to understand what's shaping our world. That ability to think critically and analyze information, that's more valuable than ever.
So as you go out into the world, remember, approach everything with a healthy dose of curiosity and a little bit of skepticism. Don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge those assumptions, seek out different perspectives.
The more informed we are, the better equipped we'll be to face the world and make those choices that align with our values. And who knows, you might even uncover some hidden treasures along the way.
Love it. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of ISD. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy exploring.